Dr. Eleanor is FAMI's Director of Formation. She recently completed her doctorate in clinical psychology, is currently finishing her master's in theology. Her ministry experience includes 12 years with InterVarsity campus ministry, and she currently works at Pepperdine, which I just found out is a Christian university. Who knew? You guys probably. But her work focuses on improving mental health outcomes for Filipino Americans through spirituality and compassion focused therapy. She is brilliant and wonderful, and the English language does not have enough descriptors to capture who Eleanor is. And every time she presents, we all get so excited, and the discussions inevitably go long just because of the depth of her wisdom that she shares with us. So I'm going to give you the rest of the time, Eleanor. With just over an hour left, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you all so much. Can you all hear me okay? I'm in my office and sometimes my patients say that I sound like a chipmunk. So I just wanted to make sure that that was not the case. But thank you, Denise, for such a warm and wonderful welcome. It's so good to see so many familiar faces here and some new faces as well. I'm so excited to share with you a lot of what the past things that I've been doing for the past 5 years. A lot of this is the research that I've been developing and I'm currently trying to live out. So this PowerPoint here, it's I'm going to be talking about compassion for community, conversation about healing, and colonial mentality. So why are we talking about this? Colonial mentality, for those of you who are not aware, we are going to get into what that is. But for those of you who may be familiar with it, may not be familiar with it, this is something that a lot of Filipino Americans and Filipinos contend with, is this psychological idea of colonial mentality. And like I said, we're going to learn a little bit more about that and how it's come about and how it manifests. But let me just tell you from a clinical provider, from a mental health provider's perspective, why this type of work is helpful and important. So if this is something that the Filipino American community contends with. And as you'll see later on in the presentation, it contributes and is correlated with so many negative, not just physical health outcomes, but negative mental health outcomes as well. But when you don't, as a provider, when you don't understand the history and the complex structures that this psychological effect is part of, is rooted in, it's like telling somebody that is struggling with asthma, that they are not getting enough exercise, but they live in a bigger contextual problem of maybe there's a lot of pollution, and just blaming the individual. And so that is something that can oftentimes happen when providers are looking to diagnose patients and try to understand what's happening for them, whether that be anxiety, depression, other types of mental illness. When these cultural historical factors are not understood properly, we can inordinately start to blame the individual for, like, there's something wrong with you. Like, you're the reason for this. It's because you don't get enough cardio exercise, why your lungs aren't working. It's like, hello, like, I'm in this terrible polluted environment. So hopefully that analogy can help you to make sense about why we're going to dive in and really drill into the historical societal factors that contribute to a lot of negative health impacts for Filipino Americans. So let me just give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be doing here today. So there are three things that we're going to be covering. And the first is understanding a basic or gaining a basic understanding of colonial mentality. Once again, I know all of us are coming from different arenas, different levels of knowledge of colonial mentality. So some of this for you may be brand new, some of this may be review for some of you, but we're all just going to get on the same page, and I'm going to give you a really brief understanding of what colonial mentality is. And second, we're going to talk about the negative health impacts of colonial mentality, not just the mental health effects, but I'm just fair warning, I'm going to get pretty nerdy on you, and we're going to talk neuroscience today. Okay, I have been working on this for years, so you all are going to have to suffer with me through my research, but we're going to talk a little bit about the neuroscience behind why colonial mentality has so many negative effects. And then lastly, we're going to explore compassionate responses. And that, as Denise mentioned, is going to be rooted in something called compassion-focused therapy, which is my humble offering to the colonial mentality psychological space. So we'll go ahead and move forward, but those are the three main things that we're going to swoop over. But before we do that, I wanted to, you don't necessarily have to get into small groups because I feel like a lot of us know each other in this space, and which is kind of fun. But maybe in the chat, instead of talking in a small group, can you just tell us a little bit about what your ministry and your work context is, and then what you're also hoping to gain from this seminar? And I'll try to. It's hard for me to monitor the chat, Denise. Would you mind reading them out for me, just because since I'm sharing my screen? Thank you. So what is your ministry or work context? I know not everybody here is in ministry. Some of you all are in the mental health fields. Some of you are in like other types of work. You're all welcome here. So glad that you are here. But what is your ministry or work context, and what are you hoping to gain from the seminar?
Yes, Nicole. Oh, okay. Okay, Pastora Ines, hi. A local pastor of a multi-ethnic church with Filipina Familia, here to be an ongoing learner as a non-Filipina and woman of color as we continue to heal from our own theological colonial complex. Kristen, multi-ethnic metropolitan areas nonprofit, hoping to articulate colonial mentality in a way that does not belittle but give context. Hi, Daphne. She works at East Lake Church in Chula Vista, ministering to young adults and also facilitating women's discipleship groups, hoping to gain fresh perspectives on colonial mentality as it relates to spiritual formation. Everybody is very excited to learn from the Doctora, Santa Eleanor. Oh, everyone's going so fast now. Just hoping for a way forward / beyond colonial mentality. Here to learn. That's Marianne. Let's see, Austin's here. Gaining insight about how we might better understand colonial mentality in our Filipino American siblings and how to act in solidarity that brings healing.
Maybe just a few more, if there's any more coming in.
To engage with the idea from a trans-Pacific perspective. This is someone in the motherland.
Ah, welcome. Good morning.
KP, more context of the effects of colonial mentality for Filipino American entertainers specifically. Dr. Nicole and Dr. Bell, to support students more authentically as they navigate how colonial mentality has wreaked havoc on their belief of self.
Maybe one more.
One more. We have Pastor Jillian Pastora, hoping to engage my community with the spiritual discipline of decolonization.
Okay, poetry, love that. So I don't know if any of you all noticed some of the main themes that were among the reasons that brought you here, but a great deal of you are here because you want to come alongside Filipino American, Filipino community members. And so you want to just support them as best as possible. Thank you. Thank you so much for wanting to come alongside and support this community. So grateful for you. Some of the other things that we heard too was just, how do I apply this to my own life? How do I apply this to my context and to who I am and who I am becoming? So hopefully there will be a little bit of something for everybody here. And I'm excited to be in this space with you all. So before we dive any deeper, I am going to go ahead and pray for us, and then we'll go into the material, okay? Let's pray. Lord, we thank you so much for the opportunity to get to be here, for folks that are coming from the Philippines, all the way across oceans, to be here in this space virtually. Lord, we pray that you would open our minds and to receive this information, God. And as we go through this information, a lot of times it can bring up emotions of anger and despair and hopelessness. And so, Lord, we pray that you would be with us in that as we grapple with some of our difficult history as Filipinos, as Filipino Americans, as Americans, Lord, that you would be here with us as we grapple with that. And Lord, would you also inspire us too? We are looking and fighting for a way forward, not just for our own wellness and wholeness, God, but we want to glorify you and bring healing into our communities for your name's sake. So would you inspire us, Lord? Teach us how to be more whole, to be the people that you have created us to be a community that you created us to be. So we give all of this to you. We give this evening to you, Lord. And it's in your name that we pray. Amen. Well, thank you all so much for sharing some of your hopes for this space. So let's go ahead and dive into colonial mentality. What is that? To understand colonial mentality, which I will sometimes abbreviate to CM because that's a lot of words to always say. But to understand CM, we must first acknowledge that the Philippines has had a long and painful history of colonization by foreign rule. We won't be able to get into all of that tonight, but I do want to invite you all to read up on this for yourselves and look into videos on YouTube, resources in the library. And here's also a plug. The FAMI formation groups offer a ton of resources in this regard. And Fuller also offers a summer course that's run by the Asian American Center, Dr. Daniel Lee and Dr. Gabriel Katanis, that offer a more in-depth survey of the history and culture of the Philippines. So if you are a Fuller student, I would recommend that you go ahead and take a look at that and see when it's going to be offered. I believe it's in the summer catalog for this summer, but don't quote me on that. Maybe you might want to inquire with the Asian American Center and see when it is. And also, if you're interested in maybe joining one of the future formation groups to get some of these resources, please feel free to reach out to FAMI or Denise and I. So I want to encourage you all to look at this history here because we're not going to have a ton of time to go into it fully this evening. But to cover it briefly, there are about 4 major movements of colonization that happened in the Philippines. And that is the pre-colonial era, where there were, these were different islands in the archipelago that were mostly separate. They were governing nations unto themselves, and they had rich cultures, societal structures, and were shaped by a diverse range of cultural influences. So then it was between about 1565 to 1898 that we had Spanish colonization. So for about 300 years, if you do that math really quickly, about 300 years, the Philippines was colonized by Spain, who introduced Catholicism, changed agricultural systems and trade and educational systems as well. Okay, so notice how I am going very fast through about 300 years of history. Once again, I just want to invite you all to do some of your own research into this because I just want to give you the broad swoops. Then in this third phase, the Americans came in the late 1800s to supposedly help the Philippine nationals to win their independence from Spain. But what really happened is the Americans took the Philippines. They took the Philippines as a spoil of war and had about 50 or so years of rule over the Philippines. And the Philippines was an American colony. During World War II, on December 7th, what we all know as a day that lived in infamy, the Philippines was also attacked, and Japan actually occupied the Philippines for a few years. Then, after the war, the Philippines was able to move toward independence. So as you can see, there's a lot of history that we just kind of really truncated really quickly here, but I know that was a very, very brief overview, but just taken together, I want you to see that the Philippine Islands has endured hundreds, literally, let that number sink in, hundreds of years of rule by a foreign entity. That's as long as America has been like a national, like a nation, basically. Hundreds of years under foreign rule. So let's take a look at the impacts that has had. All right, so this could be, more or less split into two different categories, but there were cultural effects and social effects here. So in terms of the cultural effects of colonization, religion, for example, the Spanish colonization led to widespread conversion of Filipinos to Roman Catholicism. And even today, about 80%, actually, I saw a different study that had that number way higher. It was like 93% of Filipinos identify as Catholic. And so that significantly influences local customs, festivals, and daily life. So religion, language, another thing that was changed or impacted was the introduction of like Spanish as the colonial language, which affected the local languages that were already existing in these different areas. So while Spanish is no longer like as widely spoken, many Filipino languages, like Tagalog, for example, absorbed a lot of that Spanish vocabulary. So if you've ever listened to somebody speak Tagalog, you may hear some familiar words there. And that's part of one of the effects of Spanish colonization. And furthermore, English was introduced during the American rule and is now still one of the official languages which influences education, government, and media in the Philippines. You could even turn on a television station in the Philippines or watch TFC if you're here in the States. And a lot of times they'll be speaking English, or it's like this mix of English and Taglish is what, like what you'll most likely hear. And so let's like move down to the social effects. So for example, migration patterns. Colonial history has shaped migration patterns, both internal, right, from rural areas in the Philippines to more urban areas in the Philippines, and external as well, from the Philippines, exporting folks to other areas, like specifically the United States, like Saudi Arabia, everywhere. Filipinos are everywhere. And there's a reason for that. There is governmental programs that incentivize Filipinos to go out into other countries, seek work, and to return some of that money back to the Philippines. About 10% of the GDP for the Philippines is money that's from Filipinos who are living abroad and sending money back. Can you imagine that? 10% of the GDP of the Philippines is from money that's just coming in because Filipinos are sending it. So these are some of the widespread changes that have been impacted by colonization and still today have such a huge impact on how Filipinos and Filipino Americans live their lives. Now, once again, I know that I am truncating a lot of information into one teeny tiny PowerPoint slide. So I just want to once again invite you to explore some of this information, explore what this looks like, check out some books, check out some resources. We have some of those available to you. Just want to say, go ahead and check those out. So taken together, the Philippines' history of colonization has shaped traditions, education, government, infrastructure, and really nearly every level of life for people living in that chain of islands. And this, of course, also includes the impact on psychology. So colonial mentality is a term. This is where we're going to start talking about colonial mentality. Colonial mentality is a term that describes the psychological effects of all of this. It's when people from formerly colonized countries feel inferior to the culture of their colonizers. Colonial mentality is when people feel people from formerly colonized countries feel inferior to the culture of their colonizers. Now, this can lead them to prefer foreign customs, languages, and products over their own, often resulting in a lack of pride in their cultural heritage. Or, in simpler terms, it can be considered an internalized oppression. Now, Filipino psychologist E.J. David is one of the pioneers who researched colonial mentality for the Filipino American community, and he created a colonial mentality scale or an inventory, which in a way measures the degree to which an individual may hold beliefs that are aligned with colonial mentality. And his research here has identified 5 facets or 5 categories that make up colonial mentality. And so we'll go into the 5 facets right now. The first one is within group discrimination. So folks who would have taken that colonial mentality inventory, if they endorsed within group discrimination, colonial mentality within themselves, they may have said yes to questions or items such as this. I think newly arrived immigrant Filipinos are backward, have accents, and act weird. Or I make fun of, tease, or badmouth Filipinos who speak English with strong accents. Okay, so this category of colonial mentality refers to biased attitudes and behaviors among Filipinos who are part of this cultural or ethnic group, and they may think that just like making fun of other Filipinos within this group. So the best example I could even just think of or to offer to you all to consider is a lot of Filipino American comedians. Just like take 1 second to think about a Filipino American comedian that you may know of. A lot of their shtick is making fun of Filipinos or making fun of or saying things like in a funny Filipino accent, quote unquote. And this is really common to see. It's perhaps an indication of like low-hanging fruit, because in this community, this is within group discrimination is something that's pretty widespread. Like something that a lot of Filipino Americans might understand or find funny. So that is the first factor. So let's go talk about the second factor here, and that is denigration of physical characteristics that may be considered typically Filipino. So this refers to the negative attitudes or beliefs about certain physical traits, such as skin color, hair texture, facial features, that are often associated with being Filipino. And so this can occur when individuals accept the standards of beauty and worth that are established by the colonizing entity. And so it leads to this devaluation of your own physical attributes. So people who endorsed the items in this category on the colonial mentality scale may have said yes to items such as, I do not want my children to be dark-skinned. I do not want my children to have Filipino flat noses. And I will tell you that many Filipino groups of people that I've talked to, at least one person can recall their mom pinching their noses because when they were younger, they wanted to be more pointy, not flat. And so this is like not history. Like this is something that has impacted people that are even in this space right now. So this category of colonial mentality, very present in this community. So let's go to the third facet, and that's cultural shame and embarrassment. And what this refers to is feelings of discomfort or inferiority that you may experience about Filipino culture, practices, traditions. And this occurs when we internalize the idea that our culture is less valuable or less respectable when compared to that of other countries, the colonizing entities in those cultures. And as a result, people who have colonial mentality alignment in this way may feel ashamed of their heritage, may be ashamed of their heritage or cultural expression. So they may have said yes to items such as, there are moments when I wish I were a member of a cultural group that is different from my own, or in general, I'm embarrassed by Filipino culture and traditions. Okay, so that's cultural shame and embarrassment. Okay. The next one here, this is the fourth one now out of 5, is internalized cultural and ethnic inferiority. People who endorsed colonial mentality alignment in this way may have said yes to items such as, I feel that being a person of my ethnic or cultural background is not as good as being white or European American. Okay, so it's pretty self-explanatory, but this one it refers to the belief that your own the Filipino culture or ethnic group is inferior to that of the colonizers, like objectively less valuable than another culture. And so people who internalize this can devalue their own cultural practices and see themselves as being less valuable. And as a result, may experience great deals of shame and may want to even distance themselves from their cultural heritage, may want to distance themselves from other Filipino communities. And this mindset, as you can imagine, can significantly impact self-esteem and cultural pride. Okay, so internalized cultural and ethnic inferiority. So let's go to the very last, the fifth factor here, which is colonial debt. So this describes a phenomenon in which Filipino Americans may perceive the actions of the colonizing powers as well-intentioned, right? Like a consequence of colonial debt, right? As um, a tolerance or an acceptance of contemporary oppression, such as prejudice or racial acts, toward the Filipino American community, because colonial mentality in this particular facet may justify some of this maltreatment, such as, well, I guess this is the price I have to pay to be in America. This is the price I have to pay to become civilized, right? To pay this price by allowing these acts of racial acts and prejudice to occur. So Filipino Americans who would have taken the inventory and endorsed colonial mentality in this facet may have said things like, Filipinos should be thankful to Spain and the United States for transforming the Filipino way of life into a white European American way of life. Or, in general, Filipino Americans should be thankful and feel fortunate for being in the United States. Okay. So let's have a discussion around this together. Now that you've seen the 5 factors, you could go ahead and use the chat. How do you see colonial mentality impacting maybe your own daily life or your ministry or work context? Why don't you go ahead and share in the chat? Or if you have any questions about colonial mentality, we may not be able to answer them at this moment, but it would be nice to just be able to start keeping track of that. And then we'll have some time at the end for questions as well, but just to have it somewhere in the record. But if you could just engage with this discussion, how do you see colonial mentality impacting your daily life and ministry context? And then Denise, if you could read them again, because I can't see the chat. I appreciate you.
I think everyone's thinking.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Should I tell a joke? I'm just kidding. I got energy for that, y'all. But take your time. Go ahead and think. We are okay with a little bit of silence and a moment to think. That is okay.
Do you guys need me to start playing Kai again? Okay, no.
We have Filipinos. We'll just all harmonize.
Okay, grew up in the Philippines, here based in NYC. Growing up in churches that always had a preference for English, like American songs in English, and later Australian with Hillsong music or worship songs.
Sure, preference for English. Anybody else? What does this bring up for you?
Oh, this is one. Pressure to straighten my hair to look more civilized. You're familiar.
Relatable.
Daphne, spiritual formation theory and practice is heavily westernized, leaving little room for alternative perspectives on Christian formation. I myself am steeped in no American evangelical spiritual formation theory and practice. Deference to white Americans to be more reasonable when in leadership roles.
Maybe one more, if there's one more, Denise.
Not yet.
Well, I will share from even the ones that were shared there. I resonate really hard with a lot of those. And I would suspect that a lot of folks in this place would also resonate with that. So let's take a look at some fun pie charts to talk about the widespreadness and pervasiveness of colonial mentality. Because hopefully, even just based on that quick little chat check-in, a lot of us can relate to each other's experiences with colonial mentality. Unfortunately, we can all relate. So this is a slide that talks about, once again, the pervasiveness of colonial mentality. And this is research, once again, done by psychologist E.J. David from 2017. And so this left chart over here indicates that about 70% of Filipinos who participated in this study denied having colonial mentality. They're like, no, I don't got that. 70% of them were like, I'm good. No, it's fine. However, In that same study, when participants were given an implicit association test, about 56% of the Filipinos did connect being Filipino with perceptions that were aligned with inferiority of Filipinos. So even though those numbers aren't quite the same, quite exact, what this study does suggest, is that Filipino Americans and Filipinos deal with colonial mentality probably without even realizing it, probably without even knowing that that's happening. So something to sit with. This is another statistic that I think was interesting. In the Philippines, about 1 out of 2, so that's 50% of Filipinos admitting to using skin whitening products, right? Which is a demonstration of the CM facet of denigration of those typically Filipino physical characteristics. So that's a lot. 50% is a lot. So while colonial mentality is pervasive in these ways, as demonstrated by these consumer reports, let's take a look at the health impacts. Okay. So the research has found that higher levels of colonial mentality are correlated with poorer health outcomes, such as the ones listed here. So let's take a little bit of a look at depression, since that is somewhat my area of expertise here as a mental health provider. But depression, the prevalence among Filipino Americans, it's been reported that they have higher rates of depression when compared even to other Asian American groups. It's about 20 to 30% of Filipino Americans, and I think that number is actually higher now, but about 20 to 30% of Filipino Americans will likely experience depressive symptoms at some point. But taken together as a group, Filipino Americans have higher rates of depression when compared to other Asian American subgroups. Similarly, some studies also indicate that Filipino American youths, specifically young female girls, experience the highest rates of suicidal ideation when compared to their peers. Once again, highlighting the importance of mental health and depression for Filipino Americans. Highest rates of suicidal ideation, but not suicidal completion, which is a very different category, but we can talk more about that later. But let's talk a little bit about anxiety as well. Anxiety, the prevalence shows here that Filipino Americans do experience anxiety disorders at rates comparable to or usually higher than Asian American subgroups as well. Estimating about like 15 to 20% of Filipino Americans will suffer from a clinically significant anxiety disorder. Similarly with cancer, I won't go super into this because it's not exactly my area, but cancer studies have found that Filipino Americans have had elevated rates of specific cancers such as liver and breast cancers when compared to other Asian American subgroups. Okay, so we won't be able to get into all of these, but why might this be? Why might this be? How does colonial mentality have such a negative effect on our health, right? While this is still being studied, the research that I have been doing argues that this is because colonial mentality creates a chronically stressful internal environment, So if you think about it like this, colonial mentality is like having a perpetual internal critic, and this is my life, and I'm not going to make more Filipino jokes about all of us were in piano lessons, but if you were in piano lessons, you may understand this metaphor of a bad piano teacher. Imagine one of your bad piano teachers. How was it to be under them? It was frightening. I wasn't able to focus or practice. I had no desire to play. I was mistake averse. I would drill myself so hard because I didn't want to make any mistakes, but I did anyway because of the performance anxiety. I was so stressed, and I was just a girl. I was like 13, leave me alone. But like, this is such a stressful environment to be under with a bad piano teacher. And so this is what colonial mentality can kind of be like, is having this perpetual internal bad piano teacher. So I just want to take a moment. I want to invite you all once again to use the chat. What happens in your body when you are stressed out? What happened? Think of a moment when you are stressed. What physiological changes do you notice in your body when you're stressed? And then Denise, would you be my prompter? I appreciate it.
Oh, sorry. I kept looking at you
No.
like she's reading, right? Um, Feeling like I'm in a hurry all the time. That's that's a big one.
What about your heart rate? What happens to your guys' heart rate when you're stressed out?
Ooh, freezing, wanting to isolate, higher blood pressure,
Yes. Yes, higher blood
anxiety,
pressure.
yes, difficulty breathing, chest tightness,
Hmm.
lots of heart rate, wanting
Hmm.
to escape, stomach issues, that one's for real. The
Yes.
intense need to find comfort, like sleep or food,
Hmm.
high blood.
High blood, high blood. Yes. So there's a lot of physiological changes. Like maybe imagine like your heart rate increases, your breath gets more shallow, your stomach all of a sudden starts to feel weird. You have tension in your muscles. Maybe you get a little bit shaky. I don't know if any of you are this way, but it becomes harder to concentrate. My brain gets a little bit foggier. So this is what happens under stress. Okay. So we're going to talk, here's where we get a little nerdy and talk about neuroscience here and bringing you back to your high school science days. But the reason for that is because the automatic nervous system is at play. Now, this system, the ANS, it regulates a wide range of your body's involuntary functions, such as your high blood pressure, your regulation of your temperature, thermoregulation, your gastrointestinal function, your sexual functioning, and more. The ANS does so much, and it's split into two branches. And so the first is the sympathetic nervous system, and this is our threat system. Okay, this is what is sometimes referred to as your threat system. And what this does is it helps to control and mobilize our physiological resources to prepare us for physical activity in response to some sort of environmental change. Okay, it is what helps us respond to a threat. So if you think back in our cave people days, and let's say I run into a lion, like what my body does is it starts to, my breathing gets shallow, my heart rate increases, my body gets tense, I can only focus on a little bit here. All of the things that you guys just said happens when you're stressed. And that is why. It's because your body is getting ready to either fight this lion that's in front of you, or it's going to run away from this lion. Either way, your body is needing to resource these different parts of your body, these big muscle groups, so that you can get into action. So if it feels like it's hard for you to concentrate when you're stressed, that's because your brain literally has less blood than it would have otherwise, because the blood is getting repurposed and recirculated into other parts of your body. So everything that you all said, correct. When you are stressed out, that's what happens, and that's why your body is getting ready to either fight or flee. So that's the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system, which is its partner, is also known as like the safety system, the rest and digest system. And so the parasympathetic system helps us to return the body to a state of rest and facilitates like growth and restoration. We love her. Now, both of these systems are important. Both are important for survival. But what happens? What happens when you are in a chronic state of stress and the threat system is always on, as is likely the case with colonial mentality? Now we're going to talk more neuroscience. I'm so excited. But colonial mentality is not something that's it's not just pervasive in the community, it operates at this subconscious level. So when unchecked, it is always at work here. Uh, so we're not going to be able to get into a ton of this stuff right now, but when you are in chronic stress, your brain functioning is different. Your brain structures actually change. Your brain structures actually change. There's less volume in the prefrontal cortex, less volume in the hippocampus, and all of that is related to your long-term functioning, your memory. And when you're under chronic stress, the volume of those parts of your brain is actually smaller. It is wild. Your neuroplasticity is not, it's a little bit more rigid. You experience inflammation, and social connections can be a little bit harder. So these are some of the things that can happen under chronic stress, and we're going to go even deeper into the neuroscience here. So under chronic stress, there is a cellular structural impact that happens to our bodies when we are under chronic stress, such as internalized oppression. So some studies from Kearney and Linnaeus in 2022 have found that somatic sensory inputs that bring arousal to the midbrain structures, people who suffer from high degrees of chronic stress, this can increase their it leads them to be hyper responsive to certain stimuli. So people who suffer from chronic stress in this way seem to be more attuned to stressful stimuli. And so you think about like you can think about like people who have like squirrel, you know, like that, was that from Up? Squirrel, like this hyper arousal to certain stimuli that can keep them in that stressed out state, because like they're always looking for something that is a threat to them. Okay. Other studies have found that there is a connection between chronic stress, trauma, and higher heart rates, and an inability for neurotransmitter regulation. So people with chronic stress tend to have vagal withdrawal. So that tends to result in higher heart rates, hence like the blood pressure, right? Like all of these chronic diseases that we were just talking about before. And once again, I'm just nerding out on you all here because the vagal nerve is something I'm very excited about, but the vagal nerve plays a major role in norepinephrine signaling, which is it's a neurotransmitter that is responsible for regulating that fight or flight response. And so under chronic stress, we are unable, or we are less able to tell the difference between like, am I like, should I be stressed out right now? I'm stressed out right now. And like, oh, it's actually okay. I can calm down. When we are under chronic stress like this, it becomes harder to know the difference and to be able to shift between those two states. And then the last thing that I'll say, which this one's really interesting in terms of the neuroscience of chronic stress here, is that folks who have experienced chronic stress, it can be related to like racial trauma, or, you know, as like my research is arguing, even with colonial mentality, folks who struggle in this way with chronic stress have higher baselines of it's a signaling protein called IL-6, and it plays a role in regulating these different healing processes in the body. So basically what that means is that people who have higher or chronic stress, they tend to have an overexpression of IL-6, which means that gosh, it's so interesting. An overexpression of IL-6 means that the body, when the IL-6 is there, usually what that means is like your body is like, it's trying to heal, it's trying to repair something. So when an IL-6 protein is overexpressed, what that means is that your body thinks that it is hurt. It thinks that it's injured when maybe you're not actually hurt or injured. But that chronic stress, that trauma, that colonial mentality impact that keeps within you, it's literally like your body is saying, whoa, I'm injured. And so it's creating that overexpression of the IL-6 protein. And so it's so interesting. Your body, even under chronic stress, such like this, is telling you, hey, we are wounded. And your body's responding. And that's why it has all of these negative long-term physical impacts, such as diabetes and a higher blood pressure, hypertension. It's fascinating. Arthritis, even cancer. So, oh, I'm gonna I'm just really excited about that. It's really interesting. So that is why all of these negative health impacts can occur even under these conditions. So what do we do? What do we do? If this is the case, Eleanor, what do we do? Scholars here have explored the ways to mitigate the psychological effects of colonial mentality in Filipino Americans, because if we're experiencing all of these different negative health impacts, the interplay between that internal oppression and health highlights this importance of mental health and physical well-being through these culturally competent interventions, right? So what does it mean? How do we start to decrease some of these negative health impacts? That means decreasing colonial mentality, both within ourselves and within our communities. So when I go to this next slide here, we're going to talk about the principles of decolonization, because there have been some scholars that have been approaching this. So for example, Strobel, 2015, has identified 4 principles of Filipino Americans unlearning these internalized oppression, this colonial mentality. Okay, and those 4 principles are teaching Philippine history from the perspective of the colonized, connecting contemporary experiences to the history of resistance in the Philippines, becoming aware of colonial mentality in oneself and in others, and social action and community change. So my research has emerged at a time where mental health practitioners are wondering, okay, how do we make these 4 principles of decolonization, how do we make this happen? How do we implement these principles of decolonization in the therapy room? Or for you all, like in your churches, in your spaces, in your lives, how do we make this real? How do we make this happen? So one modality that I discovered that I think can offer a lot in this space is from the work of Paul Gilbert, who is a psychologist in England, and his theory of compassion-focused therapy. So now we're going to shift and talk a little bit about CFT. So what is compassion-focused therapy? It is a psychotherapy approach that's designed to help individuals develop self-compassion and address issues like shame and self-criticism. It integrates concepts from cognitive behavioral therapy, evolutionary psychology, and neuroscience. Now, we won't have time to get into the nitty-gritty details and techniques of this theory, but this is just the overall definition. And some studies have found it to be effective in decreasing self-criticism and increasing self-soothing, as well as effective in reducing symptoms of both depression and anxiety. There are also some meta-analysis studies that are showing that it's actually been really effective for even psychotic symptoms. So CFT is not just something that sounds really good, like compassion-focused therapy. It doesn't just sound good and have a nice title, but the studies are showing that it is found to be effective in helping clinically significant mental health issues. So now that we have already discussed what happens to us when we get put into threat mode, one of the main goals of compassion-focused therapy is to help us get from threat mode to safety mode a little bit easier. So safety mode, how do you get there? How do you get there? How do you activate that? Now, safety mode can be activated by, as we see here, the absence or removal of the threat stimulus. Just remove the lion and I will feel safer, right? Seems simple. Remove the lion and I will feel safer. And that will deactivate the threat processing. Remove the self-criticism, remove the self-hatred of the physical denigration of characteristics, remove some of that poor collective self-esteem, and that removing that threat stimulus will help to deactivate some of that threat processing. And then additionally, safety mode can be activated also by the presence of social safety signals. So that's being around people that are safe, people that feel reliable, people that don't feel threatening. And I would just want to put the invitation out here that for a lot of us, that could be a lot of the people in this room. So once again, just want to thank everybody for being here and being present. You are increasing our ability to enter into safety mode. We appreciate that. So what does this look like practically? How do you activate safety mode practically? So in order to move away from colonial mentality into safety mode, there are internal ways of going about that, as well as external ways of going about that. So one of the internal ways of going about that would be to begin identifying and decreasing colonial mentality within oneself. And part of how you do that is coming to events like this and learning about what colonial mentality is, learning about the 5 facets, learning about how it impacts us. This is one step in moving in that direction. Another step moving in that direction is to apply for one of the formation groups, because we talk about this a lot as well. You will hear me plugging the formation groups in a lot of FAMI's activities, especially this month since it is Filipino American History Month, and we've got a lot of really fun stuff planned. This is just the beginning of it all. But beginning to identify and decrease colonial mentality. Another thing that you might do to help increase that internal safety is improving your sense of collective esteem. If part of colonial mentality is having this within group discrimination, with this discrimination against other Filipinos or other Filipino Americans, one activity that you might consider doing is creating a list of Filipino revolutionaries or Filipino folks in our history who have done incredible things, not just for the Philippines, but how that impact has reverberated into other facets. So looking into our history and finding out who are the heroes of Filipino and Filipino American history, who are those heroes and what is so amazing about them, being able to improve your collective self-esteem. And I would even argue that you don't even have to go as far as into our whole entire history, but even taking a look at your own family, at your own community. How has your family shown resilience in the face of all the challenges that they've faced? How has your family shown up in beautiful, God-given, God-blessed ways in the face of trauma, in the face of just so many different challenges? How have they shown up for you? Who are the heroes in your Filipino American life? Who are your heroes? And help that to improve your collective self-esteem. Now, those two activities that I just presented to you came from E.J. David's, some of his work. And so these are just different creative ideas of how to improve your collective self-esteem. Now, the second thing here that we can do is more external activities. So some external activities that can help increase that safety mode include spending time with people who celebrate your Filipino identity, right? Instead of being around people who may question you or create doubt in you, may denigrate you, may make you feel badly about yourself. Spend time with people who are open to celebrating your Filipino identity. Now, those are not the only people you have to spend time with. We live in a world where there's lots of different opinions about people. It's just kind of the reality of the world we live in. But trying to seeking communities out like this one, where your identity is celebrated, is one way to increase that safety mode processing. And then another thing that you might think about doing is doing things to serve or improve your Filipino community. I bet that if all of us Googled something in our communities, wherever it is that we're coming from, we would find Filipino communities and Filipino spaces that are seeking to serve and improve life for Filipinos around us. I know a lot of us are in California, and there's a temptation to be very California centric about all the there's a great deal of Filipinos here. But I would argue that there is going to be some community that you can be a part of. It could be this one too, where there are things happening to improve life for Filipino Americans. So these are just a few different ideas. One of my invitations for you as we leave the seminar today is, what are some things that you can do for your ministry context, for your work context, to increase safety signals, to create more safety signals, or to remove threat signals for Filipino Americans in the spaces that you're in? So to end here, I am going to invite us to engage in a compassion-focused therapy exercise. It's a loving kindness mindfulness exercise. This may be something that's familiar to some of you. It may be brand new to you. If it's brand new to you, I invite you to still participate and try this out, see how it feels for you. But this is an activity where I will walk us through. I'm going to invite us to close our eyes, but I will walk us through the activity. It'll take about 5 minutes or so to get through. But before I do that and stop sharing my screen, I will get neuroscience on us again, because I don't know about you all, but when I was exploring compassion-focused therapy, I was like, loving kindness, mindfulness, exercise, that sounds so, I don't know, it just sounds kind of like, what is that even going to help? How does that help colonial mentality? And it's, to be fair, it's not gonna fix everything. The healing of colonial mentality is a multifaceted journey. You have to be creative. You have to do it in community. There is no other way to begin decolonizing without creativity and other people. But this is one way to start approaching that. And the reason why is because exercises like this will stimulate the oxytocin opiate circuits and your vagal nervous systems. Okay, it has soothing qualities, and it will kind of start to create a more warm and hospitable internal environment that will start to counteract some of those cellular structural issues that colonial mentality can create inside of us. So it might sound cheesy, but just know that there is science behind this, and you can activate your vagal nerve today by engaging with this, or even little things. If you don't have time to do this, I want to invite you all to even think about little activities such as humming. Humming will stimulate your vagal nerve. You can even do that right now. Even fake laughing. If you decided to fake laugh while you were in your car, that will stimulate your vagus nerve, and it will still have the benefits of releasing those endorphins that promote relaxation and improved mood. So it may sound cheesy, but it is science. So that is one of the last things I want to leave with you all before we enter into this, is to engage in these soothing activities, because it is a tough world out there. And for those of us who struggle with colonial mentality and high self-criticism, it is also a tough world in here. So let's start to help ourselves out and start to stimulate that vagus nerve. All right? Okay, let me stop sharing my screen here. Is it here? So we will go through this activity together, and then we will stop for questions and feedback. Sound good? Okay, so I'm just getting out of my PowerPoint here. All right, if you all are comfortable, I will invite you to close your eyes. You can even turn your cameras off for a little bit if that makes you feel more comfortable. If you're not comfortable closing your eyes, that is okay. You can just go ahead and let your gaze sit softly on the floor or on a spot on the wall. But go ahead and just begin by getting yourself comfortable. Allow yourself to switch from your usual mode of doing, to non-doing, to simply just being. Connect with your body and bring your attention to your breathing. And that's all you have to do for the next few seconds. Follow your breath as it comes in and then out of your body. You don't need to change it. You don't need to judge it. Just simply become aware of it. You may begin to notice the different parts of your body that move up and down as you breathe in and out. You may even start to notice the coolness of the air as it comes in, and then the slight warmth as it leaves your body. Just follow your breath as it comes in and out, being totally here in each moment with each breath. If distracting thoughts arise, just acknowledge them without being involved and just return to following your breath. Now continue breathing. But now I want you to take a moment to consciously bring to mind a person or a pet for whom you are happy to see and have deep feelings of love. Bring to mind a person or a pet for whom you have deep feelings of love. Now imagine or sense this person or pet. Notice the feelings that you have for them as they arise in your body. It might be a smile that spreads across your face. It might be a feeling or a sensation of warmth in your chest. Whatever it is, allow it to be felt. Now continue to envision this person or this pet, and I want you to say these words in your mind silently to them as you continue to hold them in your vision. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live in peace no matter what you're given. And may your heart be filled with love and kindness. Now notice the feelings and sensations that arise as you say that to them, and let those feelings just be. Now I want you to slowly release that image of that person or that pet. And now I want you to bring to mind a community that you are a part of. Perhaps for those of you who want to practice improving your collective self-esteem toward Filipinos and Filipino Americans, I invite you to think about a community of Filipinos or Filipino Americans that you're a part of. If that doesn't apply to you, that's okay. Just go ahead and bring to mind a community that you are a part of. It can be your family, it could be your friends from high school, a community that you are a part of. Now try to imagine each person's face in this community as much as you can, and begin to say this to them. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live in peace, no matter what you are given. May your heart be filled with love and kindness. Once again, may you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live in peace, no matter what you are given. May your heart be filled with love and kindness. Once again, just notice the feelings and sensations that arise as you say those words, and just let them be. And once again, bring your attention back to your breathing. As you slowly start to let go of that image of the people in your community, continue to breathe. Now, lastly, I want you to render an image of yourself. It can be how you look presently. It can be how you've looked before. Just render an image of yourself. And now I want you to repeat these words to yourself in your mind's eye, saying it to this version of you that you are looking at. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live in peace, no matter what I'm given. May my heart be filled with love and kindness. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live in peace, no matter what I'm given. May my heart be filled with love and kindness. Notice the sensations and feelings that come up in you as you say those words to yourself. And just let them be. And we'll just take a few moments to sit in silence, and then I will bring us back together after a few moments. Amen. If you all are still here, we'd like to invite you to turn your cameras back on. Hello. So we would like to just take some time to get some feedback. It can be from this exercise in particular, or it can be from anything that was presented, but this is a time or a space for questions and feedback. And thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And thank you to Denise and Jay for everything that they did to help get this together. But yeah, open to questions and feedback, or Denise, if there's anything else that you'd like to add or guide us in. feel free to use the chat or to unmute yourselves. I'm trying to catch up with the chat. So I'm just like, am I missing any questions here? Okay, if there are no questions or feedback, that's totally fine. But if there is, please feel free to use the chat. One thing I do want to do is, once again, just want to give a plug to the formation groups. We do offer a ton of resources in regards to colonial mentality and reflecting on the history. And I know there's a lot of information that we covered today. But once again, the invitation to you all is to do some research on Filipino American history, as well as to be creative and be in community. There's no way that we're going to do this work without those two things. So I would like to just leave you with that. Jay, I will pass the floor to you to wrap us up.
Well, there's still a little time, but I wanted to respond to what you said, and I think others are formulating their reflections. But obviously, thank you, Dr. Eleanor, for guiding us through that. People's appreciation is filling the chat. And I know that Andrew also said he's still trying to understand what was happening inside of himself. For me, I think it was a valuable exercise. You know, I have had a very stressful week and day. And when you talked about the power of this compassion on ourselves, I think that loving kindness is a very important attribute of God. So to rest in that was very meaningful. And to consider how God wants us to experience that with other people. The person that I pictured was my mother's mother, so my maternal grandmother, my Lula. And I hadn't any clue why she came to my mind. But perhaps compassion brought her to my thinking. And I just appreciated so much the memory of her and her experiences in war under Japanese occupation that she would always tell me about, and being able to express to her in this limited way, right, what I wish for her, because she had showed that to me when I was growing up. So that was valuable for me. Thank you. And I wanted to also just express that because I know others are thinking of what they might say, and I'd invite them to unmute if they want to share it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jay.
Eleanor, you see Kristen's question in the chat?
Do you have any advice to those who are working and engaging with Philams or Filipinos who are still on their journey of recognizing that they even have colonial mentality without being accusatory, but with loving kindness? Absolutely. So this is something that comes up a lot, actually, because different when we render images, render ideas of our communities, that could be people in our churches, people in our families, and then we will find that different people are in different stages of their journey. And so one thing I want to, which makes a lot of sense, right, given people's context and just where they are at personally, and their the generation that they even came, the location in the United States that they live, like so much impacts where a person is at with their own journey with colonial mentality. So one resource I want to offer you, Kristen, maybe if I'm technologically savvy enough, we can add this to the chat. But one resource I want to point you to is it's a resource that was created by Kevin Nadal, 2011, I want to say, but is a cultural identity development model that is specifically for Filipino Americans. So there are a lot of cultural identity development models. There's like Sue and Sue for my psych folks. There's just a bunch. There's a bunch out there to help people understand how do people move through these various identity development stages. And so the one that Kevin Nadal created is specifically for Filipino Americans because he's highlighting the fact that even though Filipino Americans are underneath this umbrella of being Asian or Asian American, there are some nuances to this experience for various reasons that make us like not quite fit under that category, or maybe not quite fit into that model that is created for the general Asian American population. So one thing that, so the reason I think that resource will be helpful for you is because it outlines different experiences that will happen in each of those stages. And it will also give you an understanding of, okay, so if, let's say I'm in this stage of integration or what have you. It's also going to tell you information about how I view other Filipino Americans, how I view other folks who are considered to be other ethnic minorities, or how I even view the dominant culture. And so it will give you a little snapshot into how a person in a particular stage will experience and interact with all these different types of, all these other types of groups and given that stage. And so I would want to offer that resource to you to help you maybe even just begin to categorize the people that you are thinking of talking to and trying to understand what their perspective is. And that is always going to be number one for me. It's one of my number one tools as a therapist is just like plain curiosity. Like, where are you at? Like, where are you at and why are you here? And like, what is it that's what we're talking about here? So I think that's a great place to start is finding that frame, like grounding yourself in that framework and then being curious from there on out. Curiosity will never feel accusatory. So true, genuine curiosity, that is. So hopefully that's helpful, a helpful place to start. But we can keep talking about it more because, you know, we're neighbors. We don't live too far from each other. So great question though. Oh yes, thank you. Is that what it is, Kristen? You've dropped it in the chat?
Yes. Jen and I gave two options. You can go to a website or you can download it.
Gorgeous. Thank you. We love options.
Yes, we do.
But one other thing that I'll offer, if there are any more questions or any more feedback that's coming this way, one other thing I'll offer for the loving kindness meditation, which is like this 201 level, is to envision or render an image of somebody that is making you mad, or somebody that you are angry at, or somebody that you've had a hard time forgiving, is to try to render that image and giving them that same invocation of like, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you be happy. And so I offer that because I think that's been a really impactful practice for me personally. I say that though with the caveat that folks who have experienced trauma, people who've been like deeply hurt or unsafe with certain people, you can still try that exercise, but that's not, I hope you don't hear from me that that's an invitation to necessarily invite people back into your life if they are unsafe for you. But it is an exercise that can help toward releasing some of that pain and tension and trauma. So we can talk more about that later, but just if you're into a challenge, you know, maybe even just offer it to the person that cut you off in traffic. That's always a challenge too. So that's just something else about the loving kindness meditation. You can adapt it for yourself.
Dr. Baylon, just to connect to what you just said and even Kristen's question, I found myself inviting myself to think about my family that can be can have a bit of internalized racism, in the sense that, you know, I was thinking about, I have a slew of cousins, and I feel like oftentimes when we get together, there'll be kind of the joking about the aunts and uncles and the ones that may be fresh off the boat or fob, and even the making fun of each other's accents. And so I had like, I think going through the formation group and kind of opening myself up to all the resources and my history of my people, trying to like hold in my anger for even what's normalized around me. So I actually invited myself, as I was doing the meditation, into invocating like just positivity towards them and allowing myself to kind of lower my anger for my own family members that might do that.
Mhm.
So I actually, yeah, thank you for that.
Well, thank you for engaging with it like that. Being able to be with you in the formation groups, as I feel like, being able to connect with you on some of those things. And chances are a lot of us in this space have had similar experiences of like family members. I'm just like, are we saying that now? Like, and I think a lot of us anticipating some of that tension, some of that racialized tension, even just within group discrimination, even as we look to the holidays. And so something that and you're not necessarily asking for advice, but something that can potentially be helpful in those spaces, right, is once again, right, it can be hard to to confront all those family members because of various like dynamics within families, like Filipino, wanting things to be smooth, like interpersonal, interactions. Like it can be really hard. One thing that can be helpful is just adding life to the conversation. And so like sharing some of the things that you might be learning. So for example, if you were to engage with like I'm going to learn about heroes of Filipino history, or heroes even like of Filipinos in my own family, being able to offer those as like counter pieces of conversation, right? Like you're just adding to the conversation, and in a way very like gently and gingerly like counteracting some of the racist comments that might be getting made, and you're challenging their ideas of what it means to be Filipino as well. But yeah, really do appreciate that just that it's a tough situation to be in regardless. So I feel you, girl. This is such a fun group of people who are friends. I'm finally able to see everybody on the screen.
Maybe if there's no more questions, Dr. Eleanor, would you mind putting your email address in the chat so that folks know how to reach you if they have questions after we log off? I want to make a quick announcement about the rest of the month's events, because October, as we've said, is Filipino American History Month. But before we do that, let's just thank Dr. Baylon one more time. So thank you so much. We're so grateful to have you as part of our team and community. We learn so much from you, and not just what you say, because content is one thing, but how you embody that for us is really a gift. So thank you so much.